Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Folks, we're back looking at this case, all because it's gotten a new media attention. The Ruby Franke case, and her husband speaks out, and we all know that Ruby Franke and her partner there, Jodi Hildebrandt, was sentenced to 4 consecutive terms of 1 to 15 years in prison for their role in the abuse of these Franke children. So Hulu is doing a 3-part series starting tomorrow night on this case, and it's entitled Devil in the Family. Devil in the Family. And that, of course, it has to do with Ruby Franke. She's the devil in the family. However, we covered this case a great deal when it first came out. And we felt, there you have it, People Magazine they're slated to be on the cover of People Magazine on March 10th. And that, in the picture, in the thumbnail, is her husband, Kevin Franke, and her son, who was one of the worst members of her family, children abused by her. But we also felt in covering this story, and we'll get into it a little bit more, that Kevin Franke was not without sin. And why he was not prosecuted is beyond us. And we're gonna get into that, and we're gonna explain that. But this case is very interesting, and it touches on many different things, not just the abuse, but on the internet, on the strength of social media, on the damage of social media, on how many people are engrossed with social media and live and die by it. And that is one of the things, hopefully, that this documentary will address. So, folks, hold on to your hats, hold on to your loved ones, hold on to your cup of coffee, hold on to your glass of wine, hold on to your hat. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone, the police off-the-cuff zone.
There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
And now a word from our sponsor. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. To help me out with this sort of complicated case tonight is retired NYPD Sergeant, Professor at Albertus Magnus, attorney, and recent grandpa. Welcome to the show, Professor Mike.
Bill, good evening. Good to see you. Thank you for having me on. Welcome, everyone.
Great to have you. And I was able to track him down in Brooklyn tonight as he was making his stops at the bodegas. And we have retired NYPD detective and straight out of Brooklyn. Welcome to the show, Detective Phil Grimaldi. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you, Billy. Thank you for having me, and congratulations, Mike. God bless.
Thank you.
So, you know, we did a great deal of work on this case as it was moving forward. And there were so many things about this case that were horrific. And we see the two people in the picture left to right is Jodi Hildebrandt, who was a professional therapist. And actually, when you look at her, she was a professional therapist, but she was mind control. And she did more damage as a counselor than anyone I've ever heard of before, because she destroyed marriages. And in this case, she destroyed this marriage, although I have serious doubts and I have some serious reservations about Kevin Franke. As I said, I don't think he is I don't know how to put it, the innocent man that he is now. He walked without getting any charges, and he was involved as well as anyone else in that 8-passenger podcast that he had with his wife and all his children, where his children was so badly put upon that the audience started calling into the police that they felt that these children were being abused based on this show by itself. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, Bill, he was a 50% partnership in that 8-passenger documentary that they were doing. They would be filming this sometimes 5 days a week, putting things out there. The kids complained that they didn't have a lot of privacy, that there were some very awkward moments growing up and maturing into young adolescents. And he was 50% of that. He could have done something to stop it, say, look, we got to do something different. We can't keep doing this. They exploited their children. As far as the exploitation of the children for that TV show that they had, that podcast that they had, he was equally as liable for what that happened to those children during their formative years on that podcast. And that podcast wasn't just like for 1 year. That ran for like at least 5 years. And that to me is somewhat abusive.
And just to give our audience an idea, they had 2.5 million subscribers. I'm 2.4 million away from that, but with that audience, that size audience, they were making over $100,000 per month. So again, if that ran for 5 years, you can see the amount of money that was involved in this. Phil, your thoughts about Kevin Franke?
Kevin Franke, my thoughts. Well, was he blinded by money? Was he blinded by greed? Did he have eyes in his head? Did he have ears that worked properly? Because it was clear to see through the podcast that these children were somewhat being abused. Now, people that watched the podcast actually launched complaints against Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt based on what they saw on the podcast. He lived in the home. I mean, at some point, he had to see something. He had to take a notice of some type of abuse. And in the documentary that's coming out, I saw a quick interview before we went on the air, and he says that he believed that his wife had a tough upbringing, they're very strict and all of that. So is he going to allow that strictness to be put on to his children in such a vicious manner that people, strangers, were calling up and trying to make complaints against the mother of these children and the co-host of the podcast? I mean, it's just beyond belief that he didn't have knowledge of this. Now, like you said, Bill, he wasn't charged, and I think that yes, it seems like money and greed may have been something that steered him in a direction that he went in. But now he's so to speak cashing in again with this documentary. So I don't have much respect for someone like that. I mean, and then he leaves the house at some point because the therapist feels that him and one of the other daughters, the older daughter, should leave the house, and the son should leave the house so that way she can have control over Ruby Franke. I mean, it was obvious from what we know that there was some type of an intimate relationship between the two. So what could you possibly have in your mind that goes through your mind that you can allow your children to be subjected to things like that? So again, Bill, I'm glad you brought it up. I don't have a lot of respect for that man.
Absolutely. Kirsten Strobel, thank you, Kirsten, for this comment. And I knew it was going to come up because it's the big elephant in the room. The Utah Latter-day Saints culture is a whole thing. If you haven't lived it, you can't truly understand the undertones. And Kirsten, when we covered this case about a year ago, so many people told us that the church is involved in this in every step of the way. In fact, who do you think referred this woman here, Jodi Hildebrandt? Who do you think referred them? Her. She was referred to a lot of their parishioners. And she lost her license. So she was not she did not have angel's wings. But so the religion, the Latter-day Saints, was involved in this. I want to play this short video and we'll get a better overview of this.
Two of her children. Now a new Hulu documentary is revealing more about her story.
It's called Devil in the Family, The Fall of Ruby Franke. I recently sat down with the film's director, Ruby's estranged husband, Kevin, and her oldest son, Chad.
Sit down right here.
Go sit on the couch. Oh.
Sit her down on the flipping couch.
To millions of YouTube viewers, the Frankies were a large, happy Mormon family known to their fans as 8 passengers. But their whole world fell apart when Ruby Franke, the celebrated vlogger and mother, was arrested for child abuse.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here at my front door. He's got duct taped around each ankle. He's obviously covered in wounds.
After her youngest son escaped to a neighbor's house looking for help, her estranged husband and oldest son now sharing what they say happened.
Ruby had a lot of insecurities around authority, insecurities around being a good mom, being a good person.
It's all part of a new Hulu docuseries, Devil in the Family, The Fall of Ruby Franke.
They only saw what we wanted to show them.
Everything that Chad and Kevin remembered about this crazy story was meticulously documented in many ways.
Hey, if I hear you one word, get out.
At what point did it all change?
I think once companies started coming to us offering big money for scripts, that clicked something in my mom's brain.
Be excited to tell them where your name came from, even if you have to fake it. Fake being happy.
The real shift happened, though, when the Frankies hired Jodi Hildebrandt as a family therapist.
Welcome to Connections. I'm Jodi Hildebrandt.
Looking back, I treated her as a god, and I trusted her so much and thought that she was someone that was chosen, someone that was special.
When Ruby was arrested, Kevin and Chad weren't living with the family. Kevin hadn't had contact with his family in over a year. He says he was working on what Jodi said was his addiction to selfishness.
How could you have left your family?
The bottom line is that I was choosing to trust a licensed professional mental health counselor and my wife.
I find that so disturbing, and I don't buy it for a second. First of all, if anything, I would believe more that he was mind controlled rather than that he respected this license. Are you kidding me? A bus driver has a license. I'm going to respect a bus driver? I mean, she's an MSW, like a master's social work. It's not like she's, a surgeon, a revered surgeon or something, or some high-level academic with a PhD, and he respected that? I don't buy this guy's story at all. I just want to read this from the chat. Lynn Hohenstein, at times, LDH is a cult, and the therapist was recommended by the LDS. The husband now has less stature than the therapist. LDS referred. At times, seems similar to Scientologist brainwashing. Lynn, I think you are 150% correct, and that's what we, perhaps not being part of this Mormon, this Utah community, we don't live there. We don't understand this, but I have so many people sending me emails, and when we covered this the last time in the chat, saying it's all about this church. Mike.
Yeah, Billy, that seems, as you say, to be, it's in the background, and you have to deal with that. It's the elephant in the bedroom. You have to deal with it. We might not understand it, but from and I'm not defending Kevin whatsoever. He's a man, he's a husband, he's a father of those children. To not have any sort of contact with your children for about a year, that's bizarre. When you can easily go over there to their house and just drive yourself over there, that's inexcusable. Maybe he was a little bit brainwashed by what the church wanted him to do or what the church expected him to do, because she was appointed by the church or referred by the church. But still, at some point, I don't see how, as a father, you're going to sit there and listen to people telling you should not go visit your family. At that point, he's got an older son, Chad, and an older daughter, Shari, but he's got 4 minor kids, Abby, Julie, Russell, and Eve. And you don't see them for a year? no excuses
100%,
whatsoever.
Mike. That's not a man, in my opinion.
Right.
I think that's hitting all three of us. We're all parents. We all have
Yeah.
children, and that's hitting all three of us. Forget our law enforcement background. As a parent, you're not going to see your kids for you. If I don't see my kids for a day, I'm
Right.
thinking about them continually. So it's really just like you said, Mike. It's unacceptable. That's a bullshit story in plain English.
And they gave some terrible counsel.
Both Ruby and Jodi pleaded guilty to the charges against them. They were sentenced to a minimum of 4 years in prison.
Are you mad at her?
I never knew it was possible to absolutely just be furious and rageful at somebody, but at the same time, love them.
Do you talk to her still?
No, she's written me letters throughout the past year.
Do you still love her?
I do. I don't think I'll ever stop loving her. Does that mean that I want to just let her back into my life, let her back into my kids' lives? Absolutely not.
Now, we reached out to both Ruby and Jodi. Jodi did not respond, but Ruby's attorneys told us, we do not want to cause any distress to the Franke children. Ruby wants them to know they are loved and her priority.
So, one of the things I question here too is that the same thing that got him in this trouble, which is notoriety and television or YouTube, and they're doing again in a different form. Kevin Franke now is doing this documentary. Is this just to save the world, or is this to make money?
Bill, I just got to make a quick point now. We talked about the church, and when you talk about, it's a very, very big church. So I think perhaps they brought in a therapist to help some of their parishioners. But she lost her license in 2012. She didn't come into this family until 15 or somewhere thereafter. So, I mean, shame on them for not knowing the history of this therapist that lost her license. And she lost it through giving information within the church. So they almost had to know about it. So with that said, a lot of times people get caught up in these type of things, these cults. Now, we just recently did a lot of shows on the Zizians. Again, a cult. They take people in that are vulnerable. They're conflicted. They have emotional distress. Perhaps they have psychological, physical, sexual abuse. And they prey on people like that. Those are the people that are easy to bring into the circle, to bring in. And I think that's what went on here with Jodi Hildebrandt. She was a psychologist. She had all the education for psychology. She preyed upon a person who did go through, obviously, a very strict childhood, and she did mind control. And then they became, it appears they may have even become intimate. So with all of those things, they wanted to get the children occupied, perhaps, or get the children out of the way. And that's when the abuse started. But he really has no excuse. Kevin has no excuse.
No, Phil, and I find Jodi Hildebrandt to be like a Nazi almost, using like these mind control techniques to get people to do what she wanted them to do. And I see nothing about her that's gentle and kind and loving. I see like an evil woman. And then the fact to me that Kevin Franke didn't stand up to this woman. Like, are you kidding me? Or she told you were viewing too much porn? I would have took her by her pants and threw her ass right out the front door of my house. Are you kidding me?
The best is he refers to her in that segment you just played as, well, I was listening to a professional. Not when it comes to your children. Professional could have an opinion. You have to have your own guidance, your own opinion. And you listen, he knew what was going on. He's obviously not a moron. He's not a dumb individual. He has common sense, and he just decided, whether it was the greed factor, God only knows why he left the house for a year and didn't see the children. Perhaps he had another romantic partner or something. God only knows. But the bottom line is that this is a terrible, terrible case. These women do belong in jail for what they did. It's amazing that it spiraled so out of control. And again, I'm going to bring up the church. Where was the church in this? I mean,
Well,
did-
the
did-
church referred this
Yeah, but-
Beelzebub to everyone as a counselor.
But,
you
but
know?
were they brought up to date on the things that were taking place, where the husband's now going to leave, the oldest daughter's going to leave, the son is going to leave, the family? What I believe what they were instructed to do was give counseling to try and keep the family together. However, the family is splitting apart. I mean, was anyone in the church aware of that? I mean, that's a question that I would have.
I want to show this. This is when the police do a raid on Jodi Hildebrandt's house.
Ring, ring, ring. No, go.
They're going up. This is about a $5 million house, too. They're at the front door, and I believe she's sort of almost like ignoring them.
Police officers, open up!
The door cost about $50,000.
Got movement right here. Right there. Contact. Got movement. Open the door!
She's calling her lawyer right now.
Jodi, I need you to step out.
I have my attorney.
That's great. Step out of the house.
We're very impressed with
Step out of the house. Step out of the house.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
Come on, stand up. Is there anybody else home?
Wait a minute, how do you come to my house?
Right there.
Look, they come into my house.
Just have a seat right there.
Do you have a search warrant?
Have a seat right there.
Do you have a search
Have
warrant?
a seat right there. I'll explain everything after. Have a seat right there.
Do you have a search warrant, sir?
Control 12x11. Can you hold the air? We're searching the house.
I can tell you what's in the house.
Okay. Just have a seat right there for me.
Do you have a search warrant?
Folks, just so you know, the police are going into this house minus a search warrant under exigent circumstances, an emergency situation, because they believe there are a couple of kids here that are in danger. So that is an exception to a search warrant. So she's going, whoa, 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 whoa. You know,
Good point, Billy. Good point.
she knows her law. She's got Jacoby and Myers on the phone, but you know that doesn't matter because the police know the law and they can go. They can take the door if they need. And I would have sat her down. You know, she's not sitting down. I would have sat her down.
We'll explain it after this.
You can't just come into my house without a search warrant.
We'll explain everything after this, ma'am. Okay. Well, that's one of the reasons why we're here. So we'll explain after everything's done, after we clear the house and make sure everything's fine in
But
there.
why are you coming into my house without a
We'll
search warrant?
explain it after this.
But that doesn't make sense. You come into my house and do what you want, and then you tell me you don't have a
No,
warrant?
we'll explain why we did.
But don't you have to have a warrant?
Not at this moment, we don't. We're here on exigent circumstances.
Oh, you
And I'll explain it after this, after my sergeant and the officer.
So they went right into the house because they had some information that one of the children, and they found the child, and the child was in danger, was emaciated, hadn't been fed, was in a dark room. And so there she is there talking, oh, don't you have a warrant? You know, I love people that you have fake law degrees and they don't know the law. And then you tell them what the law is. And, you know, the officer was very kind, very professional, articulate. But Professor Mike, you want to just, I know you got the law degree. You can probably explain it better than me.
Well, anytime you have an allegation of someone in, immediate danger, that's an exigent circumstance. And especially, and I always tell my students, if it involves a child, you always have to consider that exigent circumstances. You will put your eyes on that child. If you're in law enforcement, you do not let anything stop you. If you have to take down a door, you take down a door. If you have to push somebody aside, you push somebody aside. But you have to see that child. Because I do remember a case from the 4-6 precinct where a poor kid ended up in the river floating dead in a bag. So, you'd have to take that seriously. They did the right thing. She, however, is displaying all the signs of a controlling, freaky personality where she's on the phone with her attorney. She thinks she's in power. She thinks she controls the situation. She's insisting that things go her way. He's told her like 5 or 6 times, we'll explain it to you. And suddenly she's finding out that she is not in charge of the situation because she's used to being in charge of the situation,
that's a great
in her
point.
home. Yeah. So it's totally screwing up her view of the world. And that's a good thing because she
There was
should feel
electricity,
vulnerable.
you would have saw her short circuit, I'm not
Yeah.
in charge anymore. Oh my God.
Now that was Hildebrandt too. Those aren't even her children. So
That's right.
That's another point that I think the officer could have made,
Right. They're not your children, lady.
Yeah.
Michael Joseph Murray, thank you so much for the $9.99 super sticker, folks. This is a case that you could see we get a little bit emotional over because it's really a horrific case. And the worst is this woman right here, Jodi Hildebrandt. And she was an instrument of someone. She made a lot of money. Was she an instrument of the church? But she screwed up a lot of people's lives. And when I saw her get sentenced and saw her crocodile tears, I had no sympathy. I hope she does every year of the 60 years that 4 consecutive 1 to 15s get. I hope she does 60 years because Mike and I discussed it before the show. Both her and Ruby Franke, Jodi Hildebrandt and Ruby Franke, were sentenced to 4 consecutive terms of 1 to 15. Whoa. What the hell does that mean? Well,
she only pled guilty when Frankie said that she was going to take a plea herself and testify against Hildebrandt. So that's the leverage that caused her to plead guilty. So yeah, she's the mastermind in this plot.
But Phil, what this also means is that the 1 to 15s, they could do 4 years or they could do 60 years.
Yeah.
That is all contingent. And from what I understand, Utah has a strange parole system.
Yeah, they're waiting on a parole board to make a decision on it, but I think the charges, the sentencing was consecutive, which is a good thing. So if she, like you said, if they get 1 year on each count that they pled guilty to, it's 4 years minimum. So the sentences would run consecutive, which I think is a good thing. I mean, look at that. Just look at that. Oh my God!
Those are the injuries that the son sustained when he was tied up, and horrific. Absolutely horrific. And when you see that, besides all of the mind control and the emotional torture that they were put through, it's outrageous. And I don't give any credence either to Ruby Franke. I think she was a little bit of a terrorist herself, not a little bit, a bit.
When you play that video of her yelling at the kid, you're going to have to fake being happy or whatever she said there. I mean, that gives you a little bit of a profile of the kind of mother that she was.
Well, they called her the monster mom. I want to play Banfield because this is a pretty interesting segment on Banfield.
Last week marked 1 year since Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt were hauled off to prison for the torture that they inflicted on 4 of Ruby's 6 children. Ruby was an influencer, a mom influencer. Jodi was her partner / therapist / fellow abuser of those kids. The kids were made into co-stars of Ruby's wildly successful YouTube series, 8 Passengers. At its peak, that show had 2.5 million subscribers and earned the Frankies $100,000 a month. The show espoused the benefits of strict parenting, which we now know Ruby Franke took to horrendous extremes when the cameras were not rolling. We know that she would tie her kids up, or she'd lock them in the basement, or she'd make them sleep outside in the cold if they failed in some completely pointless task like sitting against the wall. She would withhold food to dangerous levels. And at least once, she chopped off all of her daughter's hair for daring to eat. When the police finally rescued the youngest kids, after one of the kids escaped to a neighbor's house, they were emaciated with infected cuts on their legs and sores on their feet. Duct tape was wrapped around their wrists and ankles. All of this and more is being highlighted in a Hulu docuseries called Devil in the Family, The Fall of Ruby Franke.
Our entire schedule revolved around YouTube. It felt more like a set than a house.
She just wanted to show the view of a Mormon happy family, but they only saw what we wanted to show them.
Sit her down on the flipping couch. Okay, move it. If I hear one more word, get out.
The devil knocked, and we opened the door.
Through all of this, Kevin Franke, Ruby's husband, was the invisible man. He denied ever knowing the extent of what his kids were going through, and he was never charged with a crime. He's now in the process of divorcing Ruby, and while he isn't yet her ex-husband, he is going very public, and he's calling on Utah lawmakers to protect children in the future from being used as financial pawns by their influencer parents. He says he regrets ever putting his kids online. And his now 11-year-old daughter agrees. This is what she writes. Thought you'd want to hear it. I thought nothing was wrong. I felt happy, but I really wasn't. When I started getting older, I realized the YouTube channel had ruined my childhood, but at least I got some money, right? Oh, right. I actually didn't, because my mom withdrew all of it in 2023. I worked hard for that money. I acted like someone I wasn't in front of the camera, and I earned that money. But I feel like my mom used me for money. The 11-year-old continues saying, you all might be saying right now that my dad told me to say these things and is using me, but that is not true. If anyone is using their kids, it's the YouTubers filming them for money. I know I am stuck with the trauma of YouTube. Even now, I can barely make friends because my whole life, I was the center of attention. But now, without even realizing it, I seek attention from others, or I feel like they don't like me. Then those people think I'm mean. The bill that lawmakers are considering would force creators who make more than $150,000 off their kids to set aside 15% in a trust fund for them. It would also allow those kids to have their content removed if they choose after they turn 18 years old.
Thanks for.
So, I mean, this reminds me also, besides that, well, it's much worse, but child actors, not now, because I think there's protections in the law, but from years ago.
Oh, yeah.
There were child actors that made, millions of dollars, and then they reached of age and their parents had stolen all of it. And this is worse because these kids really didn't want to be part of this show, but they were forced to go on this 8 passengers YouTube show. And, just so folks out there know, YouTube doesn't control this. I mean, they control certain things. They censor certain things, but there was lots of complaints against Ruby Franke in regards to the 8 passengers show. And ultimately that's what did shut it down. And that's when she partnered up with Jodi Hildebrandt and made a YouTube channel called Connections. So this is bad in so many ways, but we'll get back to also Kevin Franke because I don't buy this guy's act at all. At all. Mike, your thoughts?
Bill, I don't. I think in some ways he's trying to look a little bit like a very wise, maybe celebrity kind of person himself. He's going to talk to the Utah legislature about passing a law that would stop the kind of things that he himself willingly engaged in as an adult male father. I don't get it. He's getting paid for the People magazine information and the cover and the shoot with his son. I don't trust him as far as I can throw him. I think all he does is want money too. There's a part of him, he liked the money too. He enjoyed it too. He subjected his children. He knew what was going on in front of the camera, and after the camera stopped rolling, he was part of it. The idea that he would get some sort of immunity or some sort of a pass from the district attorney's office, to me and to us, I think the three of us collectively, is shocking. I don't trust him whatsoever.
Me neither. And I think it's like, it's so similar what he's doing now to what he, and if you notice the oldest daughter, and I believe her name was was it Shari?
Shari.
His daughter.
Shari.
She has nothing to do with him.
No.
And because if you remember, she had broken into their house during this to get clothes and stuff like that. And he wanted to prosecute her.
Yes,
His
he
own
did.
daughter. So it's like there's some friction even among the family members. And he gets this, the one son who was the worst abused, the one I think had his, that we put the picture up of his feet right here in his hands, join him on this documentary. And it's still, you're still abusing your children, making them go on this show, in my opinion. Phil.
Yeah, Shari even called child services, but the complaint went nowhere. So there was a ton of red flags in this situation. And to see the pictures of that little boy's ankles and wrists is very, very disturbing. Very, there it is. If that's not disturbing, I don't know what is. I mean, it just unbelievable. Scarred, I think that these kids are going to be in need of therapy for maybe a long period of time. And when you hear the words, when you played the last clip of the Banfield show of Ashley Banfield, talking about the 11-year-old's words, when you read those words coming out of the mouth of an 11-year-old saying that my childhood was stolen because of the YouTube show, I mean, that's really, really deep. That's very, very deep. A child, that's an 11-year-old child saying those things. So you could imagine, the thought going through the child's mind, thinking back that her childhood was stolen. And then to top it off, whatever monetary, whatever money and monetary aspect of it was there, she says, my mom stole it from me in 2023. So again, a child like that is going to have issues. I think that there's going to be a great need for therapy. And when you think about all the things that these people did, they never took that into consideration. What is my son or my daughter going to think with all these things that I'm doing? I think they just very narcissistic behavior. They thought about themselves. And Jodi specifically was probably the biggest narcissist in this whole thing. She wanted what she wanted, and she was going to do whatever she had to do to get it. And I think what she wanted was Ruby Franke.
Yeah, I think you're right. Aussie girl, this makes me cry. Those poor kids. How long are these so-called parents in prison for? Well, only one of the parents is in prison, and that's Ruby Franke. The other one was a therapist. To call her a therapist is like calling Attila the Hun a baseball player. It's like ridiculous. As for this is from Aussie girl. As for the father, he doesn't deserve to have that title. How did he not stand up to Ruby? He's just as bad. Aussie girl, I agree 100%. And I want to play a little bit of the interview of Kevin Franke when he was first taken in. And, he just gives excuses in my mind. Anyway, folks, this is Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, please hit that subscribe button on the screen. Give us a thumbs up. Ring that bell. Share us with your friends and your family. And if you want to subscribe or you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels. We have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels. And we appreciate all of our friends, fans, and subscribers that make this show possible.
Okay. And did you ever try to reach out to the kids, drop by the home, or was there?
I honored the no separation boundary that we agreed to.
So what was your separation?
Excuse
me. Did you have a no contact order in place?
No, this was between my wife and I.
So what did Ruby ask of you when you separated?
What did she ask of me?
Did she ask you not to contact the kids?
Ruby invited me to leave the home while
I just want to say, because you might as well say, because I'm a pussy and I will do whatever I'm told. That makes me sick, this guy. And people are saying it in the chat, because I'm a wussy and I was told what to do by 2 women and I just followed it. There was no court order. I'm talking like Stefan Stearns now. Yeah. There was no court order. I was just told to do this and I did it. And I didn't see my family for 2 years because
there's nothing in the world that would have been able to keep me away from my children. I don't care what he agreed to or what she wanted or what Hildebrandt wanted. And the best is when the cop says, was it an order? And he goes, no, it was just an agreement that we had.
It was an agreement. She slapped me in the back of my head.
Thought about the choices that I've made in my life and the way that I've treated her.
Okay.
And so I left.
And how long had you and Ruby been married before?
We were married in 2000.
So about 22 years?
When we separated, we were going on 22 years. Yes.
Okay. And during your marriage, how was disciplining your kids? How would you discipline your kids?
I'm not going to answer that question.
Okay, that's fine.
Have you been since separated or since they lived here in the city of Ivins? Have you communicated with your wife regarding like disciplining with your kids or their care or their physical well-being?
No.
So is she doing this on her own, just telling you how your kids are?
She's not telling me anything about the kids.
Hey, real quick before we go any further.
That's disgusting. It's basically he stayed out of the life of his kids because he's too much of a wuss to do anything about it, right? I can't wait to see this documentary. I guarantee you it's going to be a fluff piece with him being the one telling the story and him saying how put upon he was. And anyone that knows the story, they'll never get the full story because it's going, as I said, it's going to be a fluff piece. Mike.
Yeah, Billy, with his input, he's going to make himself look like a victim here. He's got like, I was a victim of the system. I was a victim of the LDS. I was a victim of the therapist. I was a victim of my love for my wife because I agreed not to see the kids. She invited me to leave the house. Like, what are you talking about? You're the father of a bunch of kids. And, you know, that doesn't make any, it doesn't pass the straight face test at all. And as one person said in the chat, I hope he's sterile. And I do hope he does not have any more children because he does not deserve to be called father or dad at all. No way.
Yeah, I mean, when I hear this, and I mean, I can't wait to see the position they're going to take when they do this documentary. It's going to blame the devil, the devil mother that did this, and they're not going to make him at all the monster mom as on the cover of People magazine. Hulu, the title of it is going to be Devil in the Family. And what about this man? What was his complicity? What was his responsibility? Zero is from what we're hearing. Zero. Phil.
I'd like to know, and I think that detective was right onto it. What was your relationship like from when you got married in 2000 up until 22 when you left? And he says, I'm not going to answer that question. What was going on in their relationship for those years? What was his relationship with the children? Did he have a distant relationship with the children? Was he a father that never went to a soccer game or to a baseball game that his kid was on the team? I mean, what was his work habits? Did he work 2-3 jobs where he couldn't go to those things? That's some of the history and some of the questions I'd like answered. I'd like to know what it was like beforehand, so that way we can get an idea or a profile of how he just walked out the door based on an invitation from his wife to leave and not see his children for a year. Just does not add up to me. Does
Phil,
not make sense.
from the chat, Judy Jettison, the devil knocked on the door and we let her in. Yeah, are you kidding me, dude?
That's cognizant of the whole what is it, a Hulu documentary?
Yeah.
That's like fluff. That's perfect for the show. Oh, the devil knocked on the door and we let her in, and the devil is this Hildebrandt, mind control.
Yeah, in other words, I take no responsibility. It was the devil. It wasn't anyone else. It was the devil in the form of a fat blonde lady, you know?
Yeah, listen, I get it. There's a lot of components to this thing, and I think that there may have been a component, some of mind control, and, you know, she's a therapist. There was a lot of faith put into her, a lot of trust put into her. But the bottom line is he had eyes. He seen what was going on, and he decided to just walk away. And you're allowed to resist things that don't seem right to you. I mean, you know, we live in the United States of
Called
America.
being a man, Phil. It's called being a man, you know, and which he wasn't. He was a
which
poor
he wasn't.
one.
Absolutely.
Courtney C, thank you so much for the $4.99 super sticker. Guys, you know, as this isn't a first time for us that we covered this, and we said a year ago, why isn't Kevin Franke being charged? Why is he walking? He must have had a damn good attorney. They didn't lay a glove on this dude. Oh, because he was out of the house for when the worst of it took place for a year, about a year and a half. He was out of the house, and do you believe that he didn't even try to contact his children because he felt so guilty about watching porn that I won't even contact my children? I mean, this is pathetic, Mike.
Yeah, Bill, even if he decided to voluntarily leave for a short period of time, like 2 weeks, or whatever it happened to be, but to be gone a year and not to and I want to see his cell phone activity. I want to see if he truly did not contact any of the children. And I bet you he didn't. And that would show me that you're not even trying. You're not going to go by there on a Sunday afternoon to see your kids every single week or something, like, because many divorced parents and separated parents deal with this sort of thing where your one parent is out of the house, but they have 99% of them will have that contact with their children still and see what's going on. Just because you divorced or you're separated from your spouse does not mean that you give up all your parental responsibilities. They are still your children. And for him to actually sincerely not have any contact, to me, that is neglectful. And 100%. He got a pass. He got the biggest pass I've ever seen. This is like Jen Soto in the Madeline Soto case. What's the pass? I'd like for the police to explain to me and the DA to explain to me, how does this guy get a pass?
I think some of the pass may have come from the interviews with the children. Perhaps the abuse wasn't at his hands. I guess most of it was Frankie and Hildebrandt, Ruby and Jodi Hildebrandt. So that may be a component of it. And perhaps maybe, when you're looking at it from a prosecutorial standpoint, they're going to use him as a witness if there is a trial to document certain things that went on with regard to the therapist being brought into the church. The therapist and my wife requested I leave. So that could be some of the components. But yes, he definitely got a major pass. And I think I'm trying to be like, from a prosecutor's standpoint, I'm going to take the interviews of the children, and that's going to be the basis for how I'm going to proceed with the criminal charges. And that may be, he didn't put the tape on on that little boy's ankles and wrists. Maybe he didn't abuse them at all. I mean, he kind of, like you said, ethically, he's a horrible person. He had a obligation to protect your children. You have children, you have an obligation to protect them, and he failed at that miserably. Is it criminal? Probably in the minds of the prosecutors, no. And we all feel outrage about it. I mean, I'm sure, my two co-hosts here feel outrage about it. I'm sure a lot of people that were watching this podcast that they were doing were outraged. And I'm sure a lot of people in our chat tonight are outraged. But unfortunately, based on the law, it may not have been enough to put it together based on the statements of the children.
Yeah.
This is Ruby Franke going into court to get sentenced.
By sharing her controversial parenting advice on YouTube, but later wound up pleading guilty to aggravated child abuse crimes and is now serving time behind bars. Frankie's estranged husband, Kevin, spoke with ABC News and cautioned against the pitfalls of social media.
There is real danger when you place yourself or your family, your children out onto public social media, to be just careful with who they choose to put their faith in, to put their trust in, because it can have massive consequences in your life.
We're asking, was the vlogging the catalyst behind the abuse? Let's talk about it. Let's bring back in attorney Franz Borghardt.
I don't want to listen to their attorney. Look what he's making this about now. Is that what it was about? It was about social media in the way that you had a YouTube show called 8 Passengers, which you were intimately involved in for 5 years, was it, Mike?
Something like that, yeah.
5 years. And you didn't see what was going on for 5 years? What were you, like this with blinders on? And then at some point, there was so many complaints against the show from the audience that you had to abandon the show. Now your wife hooks up with this mind control savage by the name of Jodi Hildebrandt on the right here, who's an instrument of the church because she was referred by the Church of Latter-day Saints. And You allowed her to boss you around and to beat you up, proverbially beat you up and take control of your family, and you allowed it? She's in a zebra suit. That's the suit she should wear for the rest of her life. Mike.
Yeah, Bill, he did it for the money. She did it. Ruby did it for the money. When George Washington walked in the room, that became the goal for the family. The goal for the family involved not taking care of your children, protecting them. It came to monetize your children for money. And so therefore the kids became a product that you could sell to the public. And that's what they did to their children. So he shouldn't have any sort of, to me, I think it would be terrible if he would even be allowed to have any sort of contact with the minor children. The older children that are older now, the two oldest, that's one thing. But I don't think he should be anywhere near them now. He had that time that he could have been a dad. He gave it up voluntarily. After this, all of the revelations that had happened, to me, I think he's forfeited his right to try to assert any parental rights at this point. And I hope the children are in a protected environment where they have really very limited contact with him.
Yes. Someone wrote, Jungle Mom, Kevin also lost his job as a college teacher. I wonder if Jodi scared him with that power. No, I think that his job as a college teacher, he lost because of the church. And that's where the interconnection with the church and his job and all this other stuff came full circle. So we understand that this is happening. So we understand that the church has tremendous influence in this part of Utah. Jane C., this man let another adult take over his household. Yeah. Loser. Right. Yeah, I agree with you. And I have a big problem with this guy. And, it's typical of media, of television. They're just looking to make money, and they're going to present his side of the story, even though his side of the story isn't the truth. It's maybe there's some truth. It's not the whole truth. He's telling his side of the story, and he ignored all of this abuse for all these years while they were banging down $100K a month for 5 years. Figure it out. That's 1.2 mil a year. So they make 5 to 6 mil in 5 years from this podcast.
Bill, I'm going to borrow a line from you. He was blinded by dead presidents. When the dead presidents on the dollar bill, on the bills started coming in, he was blind to everything. He went along with it. And that's disgusting and terrible. The abuse you could clearly see was there. And again, I'm going to borrow your line. He was blinded by dead presidents.
Blinded by the money, that's for sure. Yep. Follow the money, and you'll find the bad acts. Let me play a little bit of this.
Child abuse charges. Kevin, Frankie, and his oldest son sat down with Eva Pilgrim. She joins us now. Hey, Eva.
Good morning, George. Kevin and Chad Frankie tell me they haven't had any contact with Ruby, but they are still dealing with the aftermath of what she did to their family. The two telling me they wanted to share their story to set the record straight.
Sit down right here.
Go sit on the couch.
Sit her down on the flipping couch.
You hear his voice in the background, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like he wasn't there. And he wants to set the record straight. Yes.
This morning, new home video of former mommy influencer and now convicted child abuser Ruby Franke.
I'm still recording!
The Utah mom of 6 was known for her tough parenting, carefully crafting her image to millions of subscribers on her 8 Passengers YouTube channel.
Some days parenting requires uncomfortable conversations.
But a disturbing reality was revealed after Ruby's youngest son escaped in August of 2023. This chilling 911 call leading to her arrest.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here at my front door asking for help. He's emaciated. He's got tape around his legs.
My wife, Ruby's sole ambition was to be seen as the perfect mom.
Frankie's estranged husband, Kevin, and oldest son, Chad, now opening up in a new Hulu docuseries, Devil in the Family, The Fall of Ruby Franke.
She just wanted to show the view of a Mormon happy family, but they only saw what we wanted to show them.
Both sitting down exclusively for the first time since Ruby's arrest.
It was so outlandish to me that it had to have been fabricated.
Before their YouTube fame, Kevin and Chad say the Frankies lived a normal life.
I had very fond memories as a young child.
Did you think your mom was a good mom?
I would say so, yeah.
We just felt very much like an average family.
At what point did it all change?
I think once companies started coming to us offering big money for scripts.
Be excited to tell them where your name came from, even if you have to fake it. Fake being happy. Okay? I don't know if I can right now.
It was a chaotic experience. So lots of yelling, lots of snapping, and lots of timeouts in the corner.
Everything that Chad and Kevin remembered about this crazy story was meticulously documented. It was like having camera crews inside the house over a decade.
Kevin and Chad say the family dynamic really shifted after Ruby hired this woman.
I'm Jodi Hildebrandt.
Therapist and life coach Jodi Hildebrandt to work with their family.
She came across as somebody who was firm and very authoritative. So we thought, oh, this is a perfect fit. What became surprising to me was when the focus gradually shifted away from just solely on our children to us as a couple.
Do you feel like she brainwashed you?
She took control of something that was very, very important to me. My marriage, my family, and she used those like a carrot on a stick.
Looking back, I treated her as a god, and I trusted her so much.
Kevin says Jodi and Ruby insisted he move out and cut off contact with his family to work on his addiction to selfishness.
How could you have left your family?
The bottom line is that I was choosing to trust a licensed professional mental health counselor and my wife, and they gave some terrible counsel. And I have regrets, and I wish that I hadn't done those things.
Do you still love her?
I do. I don't think I'll ever stop loving her. Does that mean that I want to let her back into my life, let her back into my kids' lives? Absolutely not.
Guilty. Both Ruby and Jodi pleaded guilty to 4 counts of child abuse against Ruby's 2 youngest children and could serve up to 30 years in prison. Kevin recently speaking at a Utah State House hearing advocating for child protections around family vlogging, reading a letter from his 11-year-old daughter.
I feel like my mom used me for money.
What do you want people to know?
There is real danger when you place yourself or your family, your children out onto public social media, to be just careful with who they choose to put their faith in, to put their trust in, because it can have massive consequences in your life.
What does happiness look like for you guys?
Enjoying time with my siblings, it feels a lot more free.
It's wonderful to be surrounded by my children. There's laughter again. We have a lot of new furry friends.
Our home is a zoo.
It is a zoo, and it's funny because like they chew up all the floorboards and everything. And I'm just thinking, if Ruby was here, she'd be furious, but Ruby's not, and I don't care, and I'm happy.
Now, we reached out to Jodi and Ruby for comment. Jodi had no response. Ruby responding, saying she does not want to cause any distress to the Franke children and wants them to know they are loved and her priority. You can watch the new docu.
Yeah, you know, when he's saying all those things, I'm just like, I'm shaking my head. Like, how does the public really believe he had no involvement in this? And he's now going before like government bodies and, you know, begging him to make laws against this, that of what he was involved in, you know? I just find it sort of ludicrous. Schmitty from the chat. Welcome, Schmitty. Thank you for the $5 super sticker. I wonder if the kids will ever see their father's fault. This is going from bad to worse. The pendulum cannot find Earth. Schmitty, I think you're right. And we said this the whole time that we covered this, that he was involved. And why was he not being charged at this? You know, Carol Grayston, best moderator. Thank you so much for being in the chat and for doing what you do. Phil, your thoughts about this? I mean, again, this documentary starts tomorrow night on Hulu. And I think the position they're going to take, of course, is that Ruby was the devil and he was the good guy. And I mean, if they bring in the second devil, it would have to be Jodi Hildebrandt. But I'd be interested to see what position they take on this case.
Is this going to be final thoughts, Bill?
No, not yet.
Oh, okay. My thoughts on what you just said is this. Yeah, Ruby Franke allowed Jodi Hildebrandt to bring all of this terror onto her children. So even though earlier I might have said she was like the main catalyst, meaning Hildebrandt, Ruby Franke allowed it. The husband allowed it. I would like to see some of the details of what are going to be in this documentary, because we're probably going to be able to understand a little bit more about what was going on. It's just a terrible, terrible situation. I just hope and pray that these kids can, salvage their lives and be somewhat productive. I mean, mother in jail for maybe up to, like you said, 30 to 60 years, whatever it may be, knowing that your mom betrayed you, brought this horrible situation onto you. So it's going to be a lot for those kids to overcome. The money factor here, I think that it's just continuing with Kevin. I don't think he did this out of the goodness of his heart. I'm sure that he got paid for this docuseries. So it's they got caught up in the YouTube thing. They started making a lot of money. They abused their children. I mean, he may not have been the person that was at the hand of the abuse based on not being charged, but it's just terrible how money can sway your good judgment, especially when it comes to children.
Absolutely.
Just terrible.
Some of the things that Ruby Franke, some of the abusive things she did to her children was, of course, making them do this show as often as they did do it. But she would also use other things like sleep deprivation and food deprivation.
Depriving them of
children.
food. Oh.
And that is like, Mike, that is really abuse, to deprive a child of food. And even when the child went to school, the teacher said, "Where's the lunch?" And she said, she's not going, she's being punished. She's not allowed to have lunch today. I mean, even the teacher was like, "Are you kidding me?"
Red flag.
Yeah, Billy, and Phil, that's totally a red flag. And I think as I'm looking at this, at the son talk about his dad and sitting right next to his dad, my guess is that although she was, they were both what I consider abusive parents, her abuse of the children was overt, yelling at them, screaming at them, putting them in timeout, making them sleep in a beanbag chair, making them sleep outside, making them run down the dirt road in bare feet, things like that, where his abuse of the children were neglectful and quiet and allowing passively for his wife to abuse them overtly. So I think although he is 50% guilty, just as his wife is, the children see it a different way because the mother was so over the top, but yet his abuse was very quiet. Hopefully in the future, they will come to see, and I don't wish anything bad on Kevin, but I do hope that in the future, the children, get together and reevaluate what they see in their parents and see him for what he truly was. And that was a very neglectful father.
Mike, it reminds me of the crime omission.
Right.
And omission is the failure to act when you have a legal obligation to act. And that defines Kevin Franke 100%. I'm going to tap myself on the back for that one.
No, that's good.
I said obligation earlier. You have children, you have an obligation to protect them and keep them from harm, and just failed in every shape, every manner. And Billy, we had Patricia DeMango, Judge Patricia DeMango, on the show numerous times. There was a case years ago where a woman had a child. I think it was a 7 or 8 year old child. Brought a boyfriend into the house. The father was gone. Over time, he began abusing the child, hitting the child. He eventually killed the child. They were both tried independently. Patricia DeMango saw both cases. She oversaw both cases. She gave the guy who killed the little girl 25 years. She gave the mother an extra 5 years because the mother clearly allowed it based on statements that she made to the police. She knew what was going on. She never reported to police. She never tried to stop it. And because she allowed this scumbag boyfriend to kill her daughter, Patricia DeMango, the judge in the case, gave her an extra 5-year sentence, which I think is very, very just. And in this case, I'm getting a little bit, crazy about it, that he's walking free of all of this and doing documentaries on Hulu. So it's a little frustrating, but again, I'll throw it back to what I think probably took place was with the prosecution. The kids stated that it was Frankie and Hildebrandt, Ruby, Frankie, and Jodi Hildebrandt were the ones that were at the hands of the abuse. But him walking away from the situation is it's leaving a bad taste in my mouth all around.
Absolutely. Crafty Chris from the chat. He abandoned his family for over a year, and his students at BYU had not so nice things to say about him.
Surprise.
Thank you for reminding me. BYU is controlled by who?
Right.
It's controlled by the Church of the Latter-day Saints. So if they wanted to have him lose his job, they had that control over him also. Kung Fu Panda, he continues to harm them, in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, someone made a decision that he get custody of the children, obviously, right? So it's because he has custody of the children. Carly, I'm curious what the dynamic of their marriage was.
Yes, I said that earlier.
Yep. Nora, my World War II dad called such men milquetoast. Yes, I think you're right. I've heard that expression myself. Schmitty, Kevin is addicted to cash still. I think you're right. There's dead presidents on green pieces of paper. That's what I used to say.
That's Billy's saying. Dead presidents.
And making dollars off his poor behavior. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, guys, something? I think we did a pretty good job of covering this from where it's at right now. I'm going to go first to Mike, your final thoughts, and then Phil, and then we'll say sayonara.
Okay. Yeah, Bill, I think that anybody who looks at this case and just spends a little time will see that it's just not a Ruby Frank, Jodi Hildebrandt thing, that the abuse of those children, as we can see, began years earlier and continued for a number of years. It got worse with the exit of the father, but there's nobody here who is blameless in all this. There was this abuse was going on, and these children suffered at everyone's hands, and that's inexcusable. We pray for the kids that with some sort of therapy and some loving people in their lives, constructive love and attention, that they can actually overcome this and heal and live a normal, happy life.
100%. Phil, your final thoughts.
Final thoughts. There's several kinds of abuse. There's a physical abuse, which we see the child's ankles and wrists were taped. There's emotional abuse. I think the father is guilty of that, as well as Ruby Frankie and Jodi Hildebrandt. And then there's sexual abuse, which we don't know if that played into this. But with that said, I think Mike hit on a lot of the points that were going through my mind as he was speaking. Say a prayer for these kids. These kids were put through something that really horrible. And let's hope that they can overcome it, like Mike just said, and lead healthy, productive lives and have families of their own, and obviously not pass on this abuse to their own families. Let's just keep them in our thoughts and prayers. I think there's a lot of things going on in the world. We've been through so many cases. A lot of times I say that, pray for these people, and it's really, really true. And in this case, I think that these poor kids, they need a prayer or two.
100%. Folks, this Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I'm Bill Cannon. On behalf of myself, Professor Mike, and Detective Phil Grimaldi, thanks for tuning in. Have a great night, everyone, and God bless you.
Stay safe, everyone.
One episode just ain't enough.